We're here with you on Hold My Banner, Nesson Nation, talking about, of course, the Boston Celtics, Adam, Ante, and look, it's Brian Barrett, which, by the way, happens to be his Twitter account. You should check it out. He is from The Ringer, hosts a Boston-focused podcast over there, Off the Pike, and always some good Celtics nuggets. Barrett, how we doing?
I'm doing well. I feel a lot better after the Celtics win that game on Wednesday night than I felt even after the New Orleans game, because the schedule gets really difficult. I heard you guys just talking about it. So good to see the Celtics get a win. And I will say this is what I kind of expected from the Celtics at the beginning of the season, where I'm not saying they beat the Cleveland Cavaliers by margin every time they play them, but a competitive team that gets some contributions up and down the lineup. That's what I expected, not what we saw the first 3 games of the season.
Yeah, Brian, look, you got a great head of hair. I got a great hair. Adam's hair is all great. Jaylen Brown's hair, no, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. But speaking of Jaylen Brown, he's been on fire this year. I've been a guy that's been like, Jaylen Brown is better than what people expect him to be. I have him as a guy who can finish as a top 10 MVP candidate, basically saying he's an all-NBA guy to me. What do you see out of Jaylen Brown? Do you think he can keep this thing going?
Well, the biggest thing to me is we expected that Payton, Pritchard, and Derrick White would be great from three-point territory because historically they have been, but you have one guy shooting 25%, the other guy shooting 18%. The biggest surprise to me about Jaylen Brown is I expected his playmaking to be better, and it was really good last year, career high in assists. And if you look at the potential assists this year, that's a good number. But the three-point shooting, he's shooting north of 46% from threes. This is a guy that the past 2 seasons, he's been a below-average three-point shooter. So to see that, I'm wondering if that can sustain. The last time we saw him have a good three-point shooting season was all the way back in 2021, where he was over 39%. But I do wonder, last season, the shooting numbers across the board, even the 2-point numbers, which he's been so good in that mid-range area, have been down. The big thing to me is he has the procedure of the offseason with the knee. And I'm wondering if a lot of the shooting struggles last year had to do with the knee because, look, I don't want to get too technical. I'm not a shot doctor, but I will say this. It looks like he's shooting on the way up this year. When last year it looked like at times he was shooting on the way down. So I'm not saying he's shooting 46%, but even based on the type of attempts that he takes, because a lot of them are on the pull-up variety, he's only taken 11 catch-and-shoot threes where he's 6 of 11. Let's say he shoots over 37% on the attempts that he's taking. That would be a major thing going forward from Jaylen Brown as he gets older in his career. Can he be a more consistent outside shooter? That's been the biggest thing to me. And then the leadership, man. Like, he's been really good in terms of keeping the guys positive when they were struggling. And the playmaking and the attention he's getting has been huge for this team when the guy that we thought was going to be a sidekick, Derrick White, has really struggled shooting from deep. Now, he did get to the lane last night, which was nice to see. But Derrick White, I'm the president of the Derrick White fan club. We meet weekly. And lately, like, some people haven't been showing up, so I'm a little bit worried about that.
Well, I want to keep going with that because a lot of people are down on White, on Pritchard, because either they're just box score watching, right, or listening to some of the talking heads that are just rattling off the three-point percentages that you brought up before and discounting. No, not you. not you, Ante, because I think you played basketball.
Yeah, I give him a little more credit.
You can acknowledge that. You know, Pritchard, like, the assist rate is way up. The turnover rate is way down. Yeah, he hasn't found his shot, but he's positively impacting these games. White is one of their best players when it comes to plus-minus. I know there are people out there that don't necessarily like the plus-minus stat, but again, it tells you that when he's on the floor, good things happen, independent of the fact that, of course, he hasn't found his shot from distance yet.
Yeah, well, on Pritchard, I think he's been great in the playmaking role. We see he's already sort of got this synergy with both Minott and with Keita, which I think has been huge for this team, the 10 assists that he had in that game against Cleveland. And then, so I think his shot's going to come around. He's too good of a shooter. This is a guy that shot north of 40% from deep last season. He's always been a great shooter. And I would say the same thing about Derrick White. I know Derrick White for that Sunday game, right? He was listed questionable with the wrist situation, so I'm wondering if that's part of it. The one thing I will say from a positive perspective with Derrick White, he's been really good getting his 2-point game going, where a couple of times last night, he would keep the defender on his back. He'd get to the free throw line. He got to the free throw line 6 times. So I think that's a good sign. We've seen a little bit more of that vintage floater, which he had earlier on in his career. I refuse to believe that he's going to shoot poorly for the entirety of the season, because the reality is he's even taking more 3-point attempts than he did a year ago. And on high volume last year, he's a guy that shot well over 38% from 3-point territory. And if you look at the attempts, it's not like he's taking super difficult attempts with guys at his face. He's just not converting right now. I thought getting 3 to go down last night, even though it's 12 attempts, was a good sign. So I think those two guys will get back to shooting the ball well. And even if that means, hey, Jaylen comes down a little bit, obviously, from 46%, I think that it's too hard for me to believe that two elite shooters are just going to be bad shooters all of a sudden. It'd be one thing if it's like, oh, they're getting locked down, they can't go around anybody, right? But it's like, it's a simple thing that they're good at. They should be good at this, and I think it'll sort of get back to normal in a couple of games here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they're trying to figure out that playmaking role. Obviously, losing Jason Tatum, that's a big part of what he brought to this Boston Celtics team. And a lot of people pegged it as a Jaylen Brown thing, but all three of them are taking on that kind of role of trying to figure out how to play make and also still fulfill their scoring roles on this team. Guys who aren't worried about either of those things at all are some of the other forwards, especially the young guys in Minott and Gonzalez. What do you make of their two improvements as this year has gone? It feels like every single game, those two guys have gotten better and better and better. What do you make of that?
Well, with Minott in particular, he's one of those guys that you kind of had to do a Google search. Josh Minott, who is this guy? Where did he come from? He played his collegiate ball at Memphis, was a big recruit, but didn't even play that much then. I've been really surprised with him in this lineup. And the other thing is, too, like he kind of stabilized the four. Remember the first game they start Hauser. I like Hauser coming off the bench more because he can get his three-point game going. But with Minott in particular, the thing that jumps out at you is raw athleticism. I mean, you saw him the other game against New Orleans. He's guarding the opposing point guard, taking it away and finishing at the other end. I mean, and if you look at the numbers, like second chance points when he's on the floor per 48 minutes, it's north of 27. The team that leads the NBA is Utah at 24. So they're almost 3 points better with him on the floor in terms of getting offensive rebounds and putting them back in. With him off the floor, that number's down to 11.8 second chance points per game, which would be in the bottom four of the NBA. So the activity there has been huge. And the one other thing is his shot does look really ugly. Okay, there's sort of like it's slow. There's a hitch to it, yeah. Right? But guys, we're not asking him to be somebody like a Sam Hauser or a Derrick White or a Payton Pritchard that can shoot off movement. But hey, if you're in the corner, you have to take that shot. And what we saw in that game on Wednesday night is he did hit 2 corner threes. We're not asking him to take above the break threes because if you're not screening, get to the corner. We saw him hit that. So I think that lineup has stabilized with him at the 4. Kate has been really good for them over the past 5 games, or the start of the season, I should say. And then with Hugo Gonzalez, the one thing I would like to see is it's like, all right, he has this great moment against the Knicks defending Jalen Brunson. I love the fact that he said, yeah, I can't really talk about good defense when the guy had 30. But he starts the next game. He's sort of aggravating Cade Cunningham. Like Cade Cunningham was like somebody else bring up the ball, which this new trend in the NBA with the full court pressure, I like that. I'd just like to see him play a little bit more because I know they're trying to win games, but I think the most important part of this season is, hey, let's figure out who are the guys that can actually be part of the next great Celtics team when, I don't know, we get the top 5 guy in the NBA back in Jason Tatum. So Minott, I thought it was really smart. The Celtics, I was looking at his contract, they gave him 2 years. So if he has a big year this season, it's like, whoa, this guy averaged, say, 8 points and 9 rebounds per game, and he's a valuable member of the team. He's going to have a market. Well, now we can't have a market because the Celtics have him for an extra season. So I thought that was huge. So, and look, we're 5 games in. Ugo's going to get plenty of opportunities. I would just like to see him a little bit more here rather than it's like, oh, he starts a game, now he's DNP, except at the very end of the game.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Ante said it before. He gave Brad Stevens the golf clap for, finding another diamond in the rough with Minott. And this is something that, I've had you on. We've talked about this before in the past. Like, how was Brad going to navigate and company? I just use Brad as kind of the figurehead. But that whole front office, how were they going to navigate, obviously, their financial restraints and find another, we keep comparing him to like a Derrick White, right? That Derrick White acquisition where you've got a guy who's shown real flashes in San Antonio, but you believe you can bring him into your system. He can take on a much larger role. Obviously, he's done that and could be an all-star in theory this year if he turns that shot around. But Minott, I'm not saying he's going to grow into an all-star. If nothing else, I sort of, it's not an apples to apples, but I kind of liken him to a Marcus Smart in this way. I don't go into a game saying, boy, he's got to have 10 points, or he's got to have 10 rebounds, or he's got, I don't care. I just know in some way, steals, blocks, the hustle factor, diving on the court, hashtag winning plays. I know he's going to impact winning, right? This is a guy who's going to, in some form or another, fill out the box score. And so it makes me wonder how much larger a role he can take in this system as time moves along.
Well, I would be surprised if he's taken out of the starting lineup anytime soon, just because of what he provides, right? The biggest issue for the Celtics through the first 3 games of the season was they were getting killed on the offensive glass. They were the worst offensive or defensive rebounding team in the entire NBA. You bring in Minott. What do you have? 15 rebounds. I know 5 were offensive, but still he's done a really good job on the boards, and he's been really good in terms of defensive rebounding as well. And just having that athleticism at that position when Cade is still learning how to play defense from the 5 position, like he's good there. Like if you look at their numbers with him on the court, their defense would be ranked number 2 in the league. With him off the court, that being Keita, their defense would be second to last in the league. So Keita's been very vital there. But I think it also helps when you have, I don't know, another shot blocker on the court, because the only other shot blocker besides Keita has been Minott. I don't know Derrick White from like sort of the guard position, but he's not the low man in situations where he comes over and help defense and block shots. So I think that has been huge for them. And just going back to what you said, Kaufman, about Brad Stevens, look at Sam Hauser. This guy has become one of the great shooters in the league right now from a catch and shoot perspective. Luke Cornett developed into a player that just got a huge deal in San Antonio. When he came into the league, people thought he was a stretch big. He's like the only guy in the recent history of Celtics basketball that doesn't shoot threes. And he's become one of the most effective players as a backup center in the league, right? Very valuable player. So I think Minott, this may be the same thing. It's not like, hey, he played in Minnesota and he was bad. No, he just didn't have an opportunity because Minnesota for years has had a really loaded roster, and in particular, a really loaded front court. So now he's getting sort of that opportunity. And that's why, like, the Boucher thing, was never too excited about that, because we know what he's been as a player. He's never been a great player. I'm sure he's great, like, in the locker room and all that. And I know he's got championship pedigree, although he didn't really contribute to that team. But Minott's a guy that's like, okay, maybe there's a little bit more of a ceiling there when we know who Boucher is as a player. That's why I keep looking at Minott and saying, like, dude, every time I see him do something, whoa, like that second jump when the ball is coming off the rim, he's beating everybody to the ball. So I love seeing what he's been able to contribute to this team.
So sticking with those bigs, you talked about a lot of them, but Luca Garza, I think, had a fantastic first half in that game last night. Second half, a little bit more shaky on the rim protection side and of that matter. But seeing Boucher get the DNP, seeing Minott play so well, seeing Luca Garza play so well, even seeing Tillman come in for a couple minutes and play well last night. Are we done with Chris Boucher already? Like, is he kind of like finding his way out of this lineup?
Yeah, I think so. And the thing that I would look at too is you came into the season and you thought this is probably going to be a bottom 5 center rotation in the league, right? Especially considering you just went from having Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, and Luke Cornett, right? Like Luke Cornett would be the best big on this team right now. But the thing that sticks out to me is, all right, there's potential there with Keita. And then secondarily, going back to Garza, he's a guy that didn't get a ton of opportunities in Minnesota, because going back to what I was saying about Minott, but a couple of things that have stuck out to me. First of all, last night, he has that nice little push shot where Payton Pritchard's driving around the baseline. He throws him a little bounce pass. He's got the push shot. We've seen, and I know his numbers have not been great historically shooting the 3, but it's such a small sample size. And this is just a small thing, but as a big, you see him a couple times where he's taken sort of a rhythm dribble. He's looked down at the 3-point line and actually taken a 3, and he's hit a couple this season so far. So if he can be at least a stretch big and be impactful on the offensive glass, which historically, like, his numbers on-off numbers are great when as an offensive rebounding percentage. But if he can do that, because I don't think he's ever going to be a great defender. I mean, we've watched him through the first couple of games that he's played. I know he missed a couple with the concussion situation, but he's just not going to move his feet well. He's not going to be great protecting the rim. But can you get offensive rebounds? Can you at least defensive rebound? And can you stretch the floor a little bit? Because he is sort of like a bulldozer when he goes in for those offensive rebounds. So I'd much rather have that than Boucher, who Boucher historically has been like a below average 3-point shooter, had basically one good 3-point shooting season. It's not like he's been a great contributor on the defensive end. So I might as well just roll with Garza if it's me, just to see what you have there, because everybody in the league already knows what Boucher is. I mean, this is a guy that's like 7-8 years into his career. It's not like he's 2-3 years like we're talking about the Minotts, the Garzas, that there may be more there. So I'd much rather play Garza in this particular situation. And like, if you're going to go with Tillman or Boucher, that doesn't really matter to me. It really doesn't, because I think we know what both those guys are. Although we'll give Tillman credit. He looks like he's in much better shape. I know he slimmed down a little bit. So I do think there's been a little bit more athleticism there than there's been in previous seasons.
Yeah, and he looks a little bit more confident with this Celtics system as a whole. So, but he's been here for a little bit longer.
Barrett, one more for you very quickly before we let you go. I mentioned Marcus Smart before. I think that Joe Mazzulla's probably got a little ways to go before catching up with Marcus in the polarizing department. But there are a lot of people that either don't believe in Joe or that absolutely love Joe and defend him to the wall. How impressed are you with what Joe Mazzulla has done so far to start off this year? Or are you on the other side and actually kind of nitpicking the approach?
I think it's, for me, like in terms of how I'm going to grade this season, it's a wait and see, because after the first 3 games, admittedly, I was probably too harsh on him because I'm like, well, how is this going to work, right? You're going to try to play super fast, but this is a team that historically has played super slow. So like the carryover guys that have been impact players, and we're talking about mainly Derrick White and Payton Pritchard and Sam Hauser, those guys, now Pritchard will push the ball, but that's not really a style that they've played over the past few years, which was part of their whole championship culture. The thing that I underestimated is how much work they were going to have to do to figure out the rotation. So now that they have figured this out with, hey, Minott's going to be the starting 4, and you already knew Cato was going to be the starting 5, I think that's where Joe deserves some credit here. But I think this is the year that we'll find out a lot about Mazzulla, because I will say this, Kaufman, 2 out of the past 3 seasons, I have been very disappointed with Mazzulla in the postseason. Now, the one in between, they won a championship, so it's tough to complain about that, right? But if you go back to last year, what works against the Knicks? Play fast. Don't play double bigs. What did Mazzulla do? He kept playing double bigs. And it's like, hey, Payton Pritchard in game 3, he was your leading scorer. So then in game 4, you played him 15 less minutes. What are we doing? 3 years ago, Derrick White isn't closing games. Marcus Smart's closing games. Derrick White was the far superior player. So those are 2 of the playoff runs where I was disappointed. Now, yes, they won the championship. I also think, like, hey, when you don't have Jeff Van Gundy, who was the defensive coordinator, and then, of course, Charles Lee, who I think everybody thinks is going to be a really good head coach, I think there was less voices last year to be like, hey, Joe, big thing, can we stop doing it? So this is, to me, is still to be determined with Mazzulla in terms of where he stands sort of in the NBA hierarchy because of how loaded that team was 2 years ago. But I think the past 2 games, like, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but those games may have saved the season. Because you guys mentioned the schedule, like Philly's coming up, Houston's coming up. If you had lost that New Orleans game, like, and then the Cleveland game, if you lost that, I think we still have the same sort of idea, like, oh, this team is really going to stink. Let's try to get Peterson or Debanza or Boozer, right? I think that's where we would be at today if they didn't win that game against Cleveland. So I give Mazzulla a ton of credit for that these past few games, he's found something and he's found lineups that work.
Brian Barrett's on Twitter. It's Brian Barrett, hosts the Off the Pike podcast for The Ringer and Spotify. Brian, appreciate your time, man. We'll have you back again.
All right, guys. Minott Mania.
That's right.
Minott Mania.
Make your T-shirts, everybody.